So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to finally be releasing this 5-year project. I've been working on the series since the earliest image in the series was from February 11th of 2018. That's this image. So this has really been 5 years in the making, and I'm so excited to share it with everyone. This project is titled Transcendence, Queer Restoryation, and is around gender, mythology, spirituality, and storytelling. I'm going to share some pieces tonight from the book itself, and then I'm also open to questions and answers. I've had 2 events here already, so I know some folks have heard some of the pieces that I've shared before, and some people haven't, so I'm very curious to know kind of what you all want to know. So that's why I'm going to share some from the book first, and then open Q&A, and happy to speak more about the project. Oh, and actually, while I'm here, I'll do this so you can see me more easily. So, in this time when there are there's a lot of anti-trans rhetoric and a lot of anti-trans legislation, the dedication to the book that I wrote many months ago becomes even more relevant. So I'd love to begin with that. To the ancestors, those who came before, are here now, or are yet to come, whose courage is reopening paths to gender-diverse people being welcomed and cherished on this earth. To Spirit, who knew me before I knew myself, and is a constant companion and inspiration on this journey. I'll share from the foreword, which is also the artist description of this show, as well as 1 or 2 of the stories. From the foreword, I am neither fire nor ice, day nor night, male nor female, yet something between and beyond these supposed binaries. Like a seed in the earth, I knew I was meant to change, to become something different than I appeared at first. Since the beginning of humankind, people of all genders have walked the earth, connecting deeply to transformation and fluidity in the natural world. Some communities see gender-diverse people as sacred, naturally able to walk between worlds, and often gifted as spirit walkers, seers, and healers. Other communities suppress these gifts and connections. Through journeys into forests and dunes, I find aspects of myself that once were hidden. I see an eternal queerness in nature, where skies, trees, and streams change, ebb, and flow. Transcendence is an act of restoration, sharing new myths and legends in the place of lost or harmful narratives. Winds in the trees whisper tales of queer ancestors, of growth and becoming, of remembering. The land still holds these stories, even when so many communities have forgotten. Restoryation invites people to transcend boundaries and identities to reach the deeply human experience of connection. As I worked on transforming the series from photos on the wall to a book with narratives that carried throughout the book, one of the pieces that I was thinking about was a word, and I don't know a good word in English for it, but in German there's a word, Gesamtkunstwerk, which is thinking about something as a holistic piece, all of one piece. So the images, the foreword, the stories, the image titles, all of it together is coming together in this aspect of storytelling, even as we're thinking about the cover of the book, thinking about something that brought the aspects of mythology and spirituality into the very cover and set the stage, set the the feeling of the work up for those aspects of mythology and spirituality. Each of the titles in the book is as if it is taken from the middle of a story or myth, and each of those, you'll see those on the wall as well. They end up, and another piece of that is that then they end up in the end in a list that almost reads like a poem. So this further aspect of kind of storytelling and tying pieces together. A lot of books end up having, essays or things like that at the beginning and the end. And again, thinking about that Gesandtkunst for very much wanting that to read like a story. And so that's what you just heard, was that transformed through the creation of it into this further storytelling aspect. Though the book itself is not inherently linear, one image doesn't inherently lead to the next in terms of a overt storyline. There are certainly through lines through the book, and one of those that begins is that the first story that's in the book is a creation story. I noticed how so many creation stories from places around the world, many of them specifically went into creating binary gender, and then there were some from many traditional cultures that explored beyond binary gender, or particularly had, a third gender or many genders involved in that. And yet some of the most pervasive ones, especially in Western culture, are ones that are very gendered. The Bible is the most obvious example, with the creation of man and the creation of woman, which there are various translations that have been interesting to look into as well, but I won't go there now. But in this, the story that I'm about to share, though it doesn't specifically talk about gender itself, part of this series was creating these larger stories in which people can feel seen regardless of their gender. And in this, it is a creation story with no gender, with no division of people, but instead unifying and bringing people together. This one is titled From Earth's Cradle. And one piece that I'll actually share about this before I begin it as well is initially it was the one story in the book that had gendered pronouns, that had she in there for the earth. And somebody said to me, why you? Why this book of all books? Are there gendered pronouns in here? And so that led, and so it led to this further thinking of how can the earth still be feeling in this, this parental, caring, supportive, uplifting role that we can be deeply interconnected with and not have to be gendered. And so that it transformed into From Earth's Cradle, and that's still that sense of being held and reciprocity that felt very important to the original title, but was able to carry forth. In the word restoryation, that's a part of the subtitle. Part of that is creating and shifting stories that are so often erasing of gender diverse folks, and so this is in itself a very pertinent example to that, of the ways that things can, just slight shifts can be much more welcoming and inclusive. So this story is From Earth's Cradle. Before there were people, before there were parents, before the earth knew the joys of laughter and running feet, earth thought ze had all ze could need in life. During the day, the sun bathed earth in warm rays of light, and flowers smiled down upon them from meadows and rocky cliffs alike. At night, moonbeams washed over the land, and the wind in the trees was the music that rocked earth to sleep. As time passed, the rustles and moments between sleep and wakefulness began to bring meaning, guiding earth further to create beings to dance on the surface and float through the skies. From the leaves and the trees, Z created birds and butterflies of every color. From the cliffs and hills, Z drew animals that could hop, skip, and run. The rustles from the wind in the trees guided earth to create a being that could greet them in return. This being would love and care for all aspects of life, from the animals on the ground, to the fish in the water, to the birds in the air. Z would need to draw land, water, and air together to create this being. The earth tried pressing these elements together until they seemed inseparable, but they fell apart. Z tried mixing them together in a large hollow in the ground, but to no avail. Z returned to the wind and the trees with despair in her heart. How could the elements be combined into one being? Just as this new being will need help in surviving, so too will you in creating, the wind told them. You may ask any of us. Call on any of us you need. After much thought, Earth called upon seeds at the base of a great tree, for he knew how to grow plant beings. The seeds began to stir, reaching deep into the ground for water and towards the sky for air. The earth was surprised to find the sprouts of vines rising from the soil, not a child of the great tree. Into your dreams that night, the wind whispered, of course, who but one who needs support from other beings could bring forth this creature? As the vines grew, they formed a circle near the ground, a cradle in which the newest being of creation could be supported and sheltered. The vines drew together land, water, and air to create these people that would care for Earth as they cared for them. As the people emerged and walked across the world, they, like the vines, needed support from others. They could not survive on their own. They learned from the beings around them how to gather food, shelter, and medicine, and began to understand what it means to be human. Even though we, the descendants of those first people, are no longer born in circles of vines, we are still interwoven with the earth. We are still held by Earth's cradle, still learning from the beings around us, still invited to care for Earth in return, and now the wind can guide us all in our journeys. And this story grew out of this image here. And so many of the stories in the book all grew out of some of the images there. And it's been curious to think about how two images might grow out of stories that were written before they were created. I think I'll share one more story and then go into the time of questions and answers, where I'm happy to share a wider variety of things about the book and about the project itself. This next story was actually written also in response to this image, and is titled Twilight. One of the things that I love about the process of creating stories in response to images and the intertwining of visual and written stories is how I continue to learn from the stories and the images months and years after they've been created. In writing this story, I found, so this story is titled Twilight and is around times of twilight. And I was thinking about how sometimes it is so often we are trained to look at people and think we can make assumptions by how someone looks. And also how in times of twilight things become a little bit amorphous, and we're encouraged to use other senses and towards knowing people in a wider variety of ways. And I even found, as I was in the middle of writing this, and I was out one night at twilight, walking by this tree that I've walked by, for 20 years, and seeing it in a completely different way when it was the silhouette that I was seeing as compared to during the daytime, every detail of the bark and the leaves, and thinking about how sometimes I feel more seen at times of twilight when people aren't necessarily judging things that society says is of a particular gender, something that's of a particular gender. So all of these were kind of swirling in my head as writing the story, but then also realizations. I think that seeing that tree at twilight may have come several months after writing the story. I don't remember the exact timeline, but this is one of the things that I love about myths and storytelling, is that we each come to stories with our own life experiences, with the stories that we've heard before, the ways that we have grown up and been raised. And so each person will hear a story in a different way and take something different from the story, something that's meaningful to them at that time. One of my spiritual mentors describes this as like a spiral staircase in a tower, and there's a window at each level. Each time you're seeing the same scene, but it's from a different perspective. And so each time that we might hear a story, it might bring something different, similarly to how it might bring something different to each person. So this story is titled Twilight. Before the sun was born, eternal twilight wrapped the earth. Distant stars cast the only light, and people knew each other by shape and sound, scent and feel. Each person was free to be as your full self and love as your heart desired, but this was not to continue forever. Stars flew through the sky now and again, but eventually one fell, plummeting to Earth's core. In time, a star child emerged, shining so brightly that people could hardly open their eyes. When their vision began to adjust, new sights amazed them. The light also brought pain, and their eyes were too quickly fatigued with the constant glare. A distant healer learned of this new being and journeyed to meet the star child. This child longed to fly, to be close to kin of both earth and sky. The healer knew ancient stories of star children learning to fly in far-off lands, and he offered to help. Time passed as the star child practiced in the deep woods, leaping from the tallest tree in the forest and flying higher and higher before falling back to earth. The healer always waited to catch the star child with open arms. Together they returned to the hollow of an old tree for restorative slumber. And still, while the child was flying, their light was too bright. People's vision began to overpower other senses until they were relying on sight alone to recognize one another. Height, weight, body parts, skin color, hair types, birthmarks, freckles, all created divisions where before there had been none. People began to think they could know each other just by what they looked like. They began to know each other less deeply. Judgments, conflicts, and feuds broke out. Communities began to fall apart. Bright times became longer and longer as the child flew more and more. Conflicts became stronger and stronger. Few remembered the old ways of respect and deep knowing, and the world was not coming any closer to balance. But the healer couldn't ask the star child to leave, nor ask the child to stop flying. The star child and healer talked and embraced, and soon the child leapt towards the sky for the last time. As the child's path turned west, the land was plunged into twilight, then night. People remembered other senses they had nearly forgotten, a deeper knowing that had almost been lost. Soon the sky began to lighten, and as the star child crested the opposite horizon, people saw each other again and began to forget the depths once more. Time passed. The star child continued to make this regular journey across the sky around the earth. People got used to bright brights and dark darks, calling them day and night. They found joy in the balance and rhythm of the light of day, the warm embrace of night, and the deep knowing of twilight. Even though light, dark, and twilight have come into balance, many people still focus on outward appearances. There are still many divisions and too many feuds, but the people with open hearts are learning a semblance of their once true knowing. Others will come along, but the healer has much work to do. We all do. There will come a time when people will remember, when all will be equal again, and people will know each other for who we truly are. of the interesting pieces about this story too is how it evolved over time. It was, I think, about September that I was going through the stories for the last time, finalizing some pieces, and I remembered some feedback from a workshop about a year ago, in which I read that story, and some folks, in the original story, the ending came when the star child learned to fly, and things returned to twilight, and people could see each other, could know each other for who they truly are. And someone asked, why does resolution have to come by things returning to the way that they were? Is there a way, and somebody and one group leaving? Can we find resolution in finding a new way of experiencing things and growing into new ways of learning and finding new ways of supporting and respecting each other? There's a lot of there have been a lot of stories throughout time of gender diverse people in various communities around the world, and so many of those have been erased. And so this project is a project of restoration, creating new stories and some legends where so many of those have been lost either to time or to oppression. And embedded within that word restoration is the beginning reading. It implies that this is not something new, this is connected to ancient threads, even if the strands were broken along the way. And the middle part story, the stories that influence and show us worldviews and various aspects of how we experience the world. And the endingation is something active. It's something that must be continued. The healing and growth and renewal is something active. And so with this, these connections to ancient strands and the moving forward, all of these come together in the word restoration, but also in the culmination of that story being the final one in the book, that is this beacon of hope that we can learn to see each other again without all these focuses on divisions and outward appearances. I'll say one more thing and then open to Q&A, which is one of my spiritual mentors talks about how nature doesn't like a vacuum. If we want to release an idea, it's much easier to have a new idea, something to replace it. That helps be able to release the idea more fully. And so a lot of this series in the photos and in the stories themselves are creating visions of what a future could look like, what a present could look like without so much focus on binary gender. And just moving forward, inviting folks into this restoration process as well in your own lives, around your own whatever pieces are meant for you to restore in your own lives. This isn't inherent to gender, but also ways of supporting the growth and thriving of trans folks everywhere. Two more pieces came to mind, so apparently my previous statement of saying only one more thing was a bit misleading. But currently, one other piece that I'll just mention briefly, so today is Trans Day of Visibility, and I actually did not know that when I was scheduling this day as the book launch, but I'm very excited for that. And one of the things that is makes this project feel especially important to be coming out in this time is, in this year alone, in 2023, in these 3 months that we've experienced so far, there have been 492 anti-trans bills proposed in 47 states around the country. New York is one of 3 states, also Delaware, and very surprisingly, Alabama. But there's a lot of scary things right now, and a lot of things that folks can do to help support trans folks around the country. So there is a website, translegislation.com, that I'm not going to go into a variety of things tonight, but I would just invite folks to check that out, of things to learn more and things that you can do to help support that. This work is important, and it's a part of a larger movement towards supporting folks' daily feelings of safety and being able to not just live but thrive. And so supporting those aspects of safety is something important that we can't, in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can't get to the self-actualization and if we don't have basic needs met. So that's just, I wish I didn't have to do a call to action, but we are living in scary times, and I want this to be a beacon of hope that can help move things forward. And lastly, before Q&A, I just want to do some very brief thank yous, because there have been various people that have been a part of bringing this to fruition. 5-year projects don't happen just with one person, and yes, it's been a lot to carry myself, but there have been a variety of people that have supported along the way. So my parents are here doing, helping with book sales and tea. We have a tea bar back there, so if you want tea, but they have been very supportive along the way. And the publisher encouraged me to shorten the gratitude section of my book, but it initially said something about that their late night tears and laughter encouraged me to revise yet again. And they were just supportive in so many aspects along the way. My partner is here doing photos and various things, and has just is somebody who has helped me be able to share the self that I used to be only able to show to the dudes and the trees, and now can share with more people as well. Of course, the publisher, Skylark Editions, I'm so excited to work with. Kelly Connell is an incredible artist that you have to check out, that does also work around queerness and portraiture and things. And just there have been a variety of other mentors and support systems along the way, through Quakers, through storytellers, through other photographers. My godmothers, I just got to show the book to this last weekend, and they flipped to the last page and like, our names are in the book. How did our names in the book? So Buffy and Lisa Lee are very dear to me, and Rebecca and Jens also help support that. So there's a variety of other people that are listed in the book, and I'm grateful to you all for coming to this. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm so excited to get to share this with you.